Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the day when everyone Googles MLK quotes and picks something that fits their narrow-minded ideology. So they go, hey, look, I know something. And look, I spent the day going through the Googles and the Facebooks and the Twitters and all of that, looking at Republican legislators pretending they'd be marching over the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma or taking on slave owners. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Picking out their favorite quote, whatever the number one on Google is. Or I gotta think that the RNC puts it out, and this is the one we're using today because it seemed a lot of them used. Well, the same one. Now, granted, these are the people who vote against equality. These are the people who vote against equity. These are the people who vote against humanity at every turn. So on this day, I kind of go, it's disingenuous. Maybe sit down. Maybe sit this one out. Maybe try not to be, woke in this moment. Maybe, shut up. Just a thought, just throwing that out there because it's interesting to me. Interesting. Again, the very people who pursue the worst policies for the people that King was standing up and fighting for, they're attempting to steal the legacy. I find that ironic and interesting and sad and a whole bunch of things. Now, the National Rifle Association, even they got into it. They tweeted out today, the National Rifle Association celebrates the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his commitment to freedom for every American, regardless of race, color, or creed. Freedom is never guaranteed. We must continue to fight to preserve our liberty, i.e., buy more guns. Now, I do find it odd since, King was shot and killed with a gun, one that was, as I understand, illegally gotten, but never mind. Don't look behind the curtain. The NRA wants you to believe that they would have been right there with King. They'd have been marching right there at the Lorraine Motel, standing guard had they known. Now, we know why King was in Memphis when he was murdered. He was there supporting sanitation workers. He was there supporting workers to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, because economics something pretty special to him. Because understand, what good is it to have equality if you don't have equality? Now, what caught my attention today, other than the irony of all of these people throwing out these King quotes that are, well, just disingenuous and sad. There was a story out of Arkansas. Disgraceful, horrible. That, just grabbed my attention. Evidently, it broke on Friday. There was a lawsuit. This homeless guy with a very low IQ. They said the IQ somewhere like 55. 50-year-old man was, just hanging around the police station in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Something I guess he had done all the time. But on this one particular day, he points his finger like it's a gun and he points it at people, and they arrest him for terroristic threats in the first degree. Pointing the finger, remember? Now, everyone agrees he had not the mental capacity to make those threats, but for his own safety, they arrested him and they put him in jail for the concerns, the well-being, the safety of not just the police, but him as well. They put him in jail. They're going to get him the help he needs. Now, this guy is 6'2", 200 pounds, big guy, big black man, scary. They lock him up on $1,000 bond. He's homeless. He's broke. He doesn't have the $100 for cash bail to get out. So he sits in jail over a year. For over a year. Now, this isn't unusual. This is the reason that people are against cash bail, because, people don't have the resources to be able to get out, where someone with a meager amount of resources could easily get out and go on with their life and deal with whatever legal problems they have and all that. I think of the guy in Philadelphia who, stole 3 peppermint patties and served, sat in jail 500 plus days, just awaiting for a place to have his trial. Not even sentenced. And that's what this guy is. He has not been sentenced. He's waiting for them to figure out what they're going to do. So much for that right to a speedy trial thing. Well, they lock him up and put him in solitary confinement for over a year. I'm just going to read the Newsweek article. From then, everything else that could have gone wrong for Mr. Price did. His mind lost, his health gone, and seemingly no one paying attention to his well-being. Price was dead a year later at 51. He was found in solitary confinement cell with his eyes wide open, naked, starved, dried saliva on his corners of his mouth, in a pool of standing water so large at his feet he shriveled. He had long since had his medication taken away. Toward the end, he resorted to eating his own feces and drinking his own urine. They starved this man to death. And all along, they said, oh, every day's checked. They checked on him every day. Inmate's okay. Now, this is a 200-pound guy, 6'2", 200-pound guy, big guy. When they weighed him for the autopsy, and the autopsy photos are disturbing to say the least, he weighed just 90 pounds. 90 pounds. This is America, friends. This is Arkansas. So when I see Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, coming out talking about, we need competition in schools and, we need to take on those failing schools, I'm of the mindset it's time to start breaking up these failed states. It's time we stop funding these failed states like Arkansas, like Mississippi, like Alabama, who, oh, by the way, Mississippi and Alabama have an interesting little tradition today on Martin Luther King's birthday. You know what that is? They also celebrate Robert E. Lee Day. Bipartisanship. Because, they should go together. So I'm in this moment where it's time maybe we start talking about defunding these failed states. Because clearly they're not protecting the civil rights of their citizens. They don't care about their citizens. Because if you listen to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and this is where my mind went, she said the schools are failing, we need to get rid of them, and because it's all about the children. Well, you know what? It's all about the citizens. And it's clear that these states cannot protect their citizens. So it's time we start breaking up these states. It's time we start breaking up these failed states. But as I read this story, and I'm just heartbroken, because the humanity, how do you sit and watch somebody starve to death right before your very eyes? How do you watch somebody go from 200 pounds down to 90 pounds over a year and starve to, and be in the condition? How do you do that? How does a human being do that to another? And why are those people in any position of power whatsoever? So for those who say, well, it's a lot better than it used to be, it might be better, but I don't know that's a lot. I used to be one of those people who thought, it's not about black and white, it's about green. It's the economic disadvantages and it's all that. But back in 2015, when we went on our civil rights tour, and we went to all of those places throughout the South that treated black people really, really badly, that now have museums going, look how bad we were to them. And here, come be, disaster tourists. And you see those images and you see those photos and you see that it's heartbreaking. It's angering. So to hear Republicans say, well, you want to learn about critical race theory, and yeah, I want to learn actual history so that maybe this doesn't happen. Today, they starved a man to death in a jail cell where he was supposed to be for his own good, for his protection. Remind me, next time someone wants to protect me, don't call them. Want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, I keep coming back to this. You know, I don't know how you can do to a human being what those folks in Fort Smith, Arkansas did to that man. I have no idea. I have no idea. Color of your skin, I don't get it. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how we doing?
Oh, we're doing okay. I can't even watch an animal starve, let alone a human. And I tend to agree with you that we need to defund these failing southern states.
The sad reality is
enough.
No, the reality is, Alice, is we spend so much money on propping them up. We give our tax dollars from if you're Massachusetts, if you're New Jersey, if you're California, you've got to be flipping mad because you're funding them. You're funding this kind of dysfunction. And what we know is they're failed governments. They have lower wages, less health care for their workers. During the pandemic, more people died because of their failed leadership. We know the work environments are less safe. They're covered by less health care. Life basically just all over worse. And yet we're funding this. So what? So that we can make some rich people even richer?
Well, yes. And not only that, is their stupidity affects the rest of us also. I mean, let's just take a look at Texas. You know, all of a sudden they were wanting to sue this state and that state, and because their civil rights of their voters, all this kind of nonsense. And they're basically killing the rest of us by spreading the COVID germs. But hey, it's just crazy. But you have to remember, Rick. And I'm totally serious when I say this to you. You have to remember this, that those Southern people actually believe that black people are not human. And I'm not joking about this. They literally believe that, they look human, but they're not the same as us.
Yeah, there's a sense. Look, when I was in Georgia for a couple of weeks, I kept hearing that kind of frame that he's a good one, he'll do what he's told, that kind of stuff that you would hope went away years ago. I'm not going to go with all people in the South are like this, but yeah, there's definitely an element there, absolutely, without question. I agree with you.
There is, but you know what? All we can do is fight a good fight. You have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, I'm serious about this. It's time to start defunding these failed states. It's time for the federal government to go in and start protecting people. This kind of stuff cannot happen. You go, well, it's just some local yokels. Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem. It's infuriating. The segue, not a good one. Because I'm going, how do I go from, because I'm angry about this situation, but I'm also angry about the fact that, we keep hearing about inflation. We keep hearing about, all of the pain and suffering. Have you noticed that since the election, Republicans haven't been talking about, inflation very much? They want a recession, but they haven't been talking about the inflation so much. Because we're not really suffering from inflation. We're suffering from corporate greed. We're suffering from the rich and powerful being able to line their pockets at the expense of the rest of us. And I point today to the story of Wendy's, because Wendy's has risen their prices again, I guess an additional 5% this year. And the CEO of Wendy's blames it on, it's those workers' fault. It's the wage increases. We had to raise the prices because, those workers demand wages. It's the cost of commodity. It's not us. No, it's not us. Yet the real story, Wendy's profits jumped 36% in 2021. And net income was up 70%. So again, it's not inflation. It's good old-fashioned American corporate greed. And I said this from day one. When the first report came out, saying, we're suffering from inflation. No, it's not inflation. This is by choice. This is corporate America going, aha, here's an opportunity to line our pockets. Now understand, their profits increased 36% in 2021. Now they're complaining that it's the wages, yet 87% of their workforce make less than $15 an hour. 17% of their workforce make less than $10 an hour. I'm sorry, I don't see am I missing something? Or wait a second, maybe it's the CEO's pay that's caused all the inflation. Because again, if you put me in a room with Bill Gates or with Elon Musk, well, maybe not Musk anymore, but if you put me in the room with Gates or with Bezos, yeah, we're going to be gazillionaires together. I'm still poor, but the average is really good. Now, the reason I bring up Wendy's, because they jacked up their prices, complaining it's those greedy workers. Yet we see the profit margins. And the story today, about an hour ago I found this, over at investing.com, they've pointed out the 5 biggest stock buybacks, Wendy's being number one. Wendy's Incorporated, they said, jumped 6% after the company announced $500 million share repurchase authorization. Yeah, stock buybacks. That means that they couldn't figure out what to do with this $500 million windfall. We got all this cash laying around. What are we going to do with it? We're certainly not going to give it to the workers because we raised the prices and blamed them so we could get this $500 million. What are we going to do? Oh, we're going to enrich ourselves. And, well, that's what they've done. Also in that world of stock buybacks, Victoria's Secrets. Evidently, they've made a cool $250 million in excess profits that they want to buy back some shares with to enrich the CEOs. We're seeing these stock buybacks, which if you see this in the news, if you're a working person and you see this, you should be angry. You should be furious because that was stolen from you, from me, from working people. Well, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because in the past, before we had these kind of things, thanks Ronald Reagan, that profit was something that unions used to sit down and bargain for. Say, hey, you got $500 million in extra profits. How about we give some of that to the people who actually earned it? How about we have higher wages, better working conditions, better health care, better retirement security? I mean, stop and think about the fact that retirement security is gone. It's gone. There's no more retirement plans left. I still remember the defined benefit pension funds. I know it's hard to remember. You got to think back a while. But there used to be a thing called a defined benefit pension, where at the end of your years, you got X amount of dollars for the rest of your life. Gone. Now we give you these wonderful 401ks that nobody can afford to fund. And we're heading towards a retirement crisis, a tsunami of people who don't have anything set aside and are literally going to have to work till they die because we got to keep feeding the profit monster. Because the profit monster wants more. It never ends. You look at the fact that, according to Oxfam, they found the pandemic years, 2020, 2021, 63% of all new global wealth was captured by the top 1%. What that means is the billionaires, our ultra wealthy, they gained an average of $1.7 million for every $1 in new wealth earned by those at the bottom. The rest of us, the 90% of us. Stop and think about that for a minute. Think about the enormity of that statement. Think of how screwed up our economic system is. And this is where, for me, it comes back to the politics. It comes back to, it matters who we elect. All of the other stuff is, all the outrage candy, all of the divisive stuff, all of that stuff aside, it's about, we're getting robbed daily. Corporate America is sticking it to us at every turn. And then, telling us, no, it's something else. It's inflation. It's not that we've made the choice to raise prices through the roof. It's not that people have seen a good opportunity to be greedy. Because again, remember, the free market, because we're sold this free market ideology. We're sold this from birth, that this is a free market economy. The only problem with a free market economy is you can't have a free market economy unless you have the freedom to abstain. That's what makes it free. Sorry, housing is something that, they don't let us live on the streets. Food isn't free. You have to, utilities, just to live. Heck, you go to jail, they're going to charge you. Or they might kill you. And we're in this moment where, again, we're still, the email I get from people is just outrageous on the divisive stuff. And you go, but what's really important is how are we going to ensure that people are able to keep a roof over their head, food on the table, a future. But that's not where we are anymore. Corporate America has done a nice job. Nice job of muddying the waters, nice job of slicing and dicing and pitting us against each other. Why? Again, 63% of all new wealth on this planet was captured by the 1%. That's insane. Literally insane. So as I go through this, I can't help but think that this is a moment where we have got to come together and push back and be done. Be done with the divisiveness. Be done with the outrage candy. And say, you know what? It's about time we have an economic system that works for working people, a tax code that taxes the wealthy. Bring back the good socialist president, Dwight David Eisenhower. That's what I say. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day General William T. Sherman issued Field Order Number 15. The order sought to redistribute 400,000 acres of land to freed blacks in 40-acre tracts. The area stretched from Charleston, South Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, from the Atlantic Ocean to 30 miles inland. It also included many coastal islands, as well as Georgia's Sea Islands. Coming on the heels of Sherman's march to the sea, the order was issued from Savannah, Georgia. 4 days earlier, Sherman had met with 20 black ministers and the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton. Sherman and Stanton asked the group a series of questions. How did they understand slavery, and what did freedom mean to them? When asked what the freedmen wanted most, Garrison Frazier, the group's spokesman, replied land. and when asked whether they would prefer to live among whites or not, they replied no, as the prejudice of whites would take years to overcome. The order provided for the immediate settlement of black refugees on confiscated land. Land redistribution to former slaves was radical policy to break the economic power of the Confederacy, punish South Carolina for starting the war, and begin to consolidate a new class of agricultural laborers. The land titles were possessory, however, and contingent upon the Freedmen's Bureau to award permanent titles. President Andrew Johnson moved quickly in the wake of Lincoln's assassination to overturn Field Order No. 15. Within a year, it would be reversed and confiscated lands would be returned to newly pardoned Confederates and plantation owners. The overturning of the order and later of Reconstruction would lay the basis for a new type of slavery, that of sharecropping, debt peonage, and contract labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Sometimes little things can be a big deal. For example, in considering ways to help protect Mother Earth from global environmental rampages by us humans, look out your window. In many cities and most suburbs, chances are you're looking at a lawn, a grass-carpeted yard that looks almost the same as the one next door, the one next to it, etc. Some see a lush expanse of green grass as the ultimate in landscaping beauty, and some even consider a well-manicured lawn to be a measure of one's moral character. Beauty and piety aside, though, the spread and intensification of lawn culture has become an environmental extravagance that is already unsustainable in whole sections of our country, and it adds up to a steadily increasing burden on Earth's essential resources. Grass itself is natural, but keeping it alive across thousands of square miles is not, for it requires a deluge of chemicals and endless rivers of water applied again and again, yard after yard, trying to keep those plots green. And, oh, the irony, their green includes eliminating bees, butterflies, and, well, nature. One statistic tells the tale. Americans use more than 10 times more poison per acre on lawns than America's farmers use on their crops. Just glance around you and you'll see the grass lawn imperative at work throughout your community. It surrounds local schools, greens up corporate complexes, spreads across college campuses, forms miles of golf courses, etc. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is not a diatribe against grassy plots, which can be natural joys. But let's get real, get creative, and get in touch with the full balance and beauty of nature. You can promote ground cover sanity right where you live with native plants, xeriscaping, organic methods, rain gardens, and rewilding your yard with things like prairie grass. For help, go to rewild.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, I think education is the conservative battlefield. They're gearing up to finish off education, public education. Hey, Education Incorporated, the moneyed interests see it as the next profit center, but politicians see it as a way, to keep people in line. Don't ask too many questions, be a good one. And that's kind of frightening because for me, education is about expanding thought, asking questions, lots of them all the time, and not just falling into, being someone who Googles Martin Luther King Jr. and picks out a quote that fits your narrow-minded ideology and slap it out there like you'd be someone who'd be marching in Selma. Scary times we're in. That's why I've asked a teacher to come today and share some thoughts on, Martin Luther King Day and also the state of public education in the country. That's why I've asked Catherine Vaughn to come talk with us. She's an elementary art teacher, also a writer. Catherine, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me, and especially on this very important day. I fully believe that public education is a civil right. So to talk about it today on Martin Luther King Day seems very special.
Yeah, and you're from the Memphis area, so it seemed particularly fitting given the fact that, Dr. King was murdered in Memphis while they're, standing up for striking public sector workers, garbage workers who were literally dying on the job because of lack of voice and to this day still don't have a pension. And that's kind of the education we don't get about Dr. King. We get the Google quotes that my Republican friends love to throw out.
That's exactly right. Yes, where I live, for your listeners' benefit, is I live about halfway in between Memphis and halfway in between where Alex Haley wrote Roots. So I am in a cotton field. I'm in an area that's been overlooked for a very long time and has seen a lot of struggle in recent years and throughout its past.
Now, education being one of those things that, again, I think has the opportunity to raise people up or to keep them sadly where they are. And I look at a lot of our inner cities. I look at a lot of our poverty-ridden areas. We're just not funding education. In fact, in Missouri, I understand there's some rural districts that have gone to a 4-day school week because they're just not funding education at the proper level. And also, I would argue that we're dividing the education dollars to hand off to profiteers for the latest gimmick, be it charters or cyber charters or whatever that next gimmick's going to be. What's going on in your state?
Yes, well, I couldn't agree with you more. Education, especially public education, is the great equalizer in our country. It's the one institution where you learn to work with people from all types of different backgrounds, demographics, religions, points of view. Nowhere else in America are people getting that type of exposure to diversity as they are in a public education classroom. Tennessee is one of the states that is at the forefront of this conservative rewriting of public ed. And we tend to pass more laws about public education than most other states in the nation. This last year, we saw CRT bans, we saw attacks on our public libraries and our classroom libraries. Tennessee has really had an interesting time in the last couple of years as far as education. We're incredibly defunded. My state is probably 40, and we're in the lower 40s when it comes to education funding. It's a battle here, and a lot of people are leaving.
Now, the education front, you point out that the theory about race that's critical, that everyone on the right is all lathered up about. I see it as just learning basic history. Now, back in 2015, we did a civil rights tour here as part of the show. And we went to a lot, every state throughout the South, and a lot of places where they've now put up, civil rights institutes and museums and tourist traps of going, hey, look how bad we were to people. Come to partake in our tourism. Disaster tourism is what I've been calling it. And the images and the history that is in those places is seriously disturbing. And I think something that needs to be learned so that maybe, I don't know, maybe in 2021 you don't have Fort Smith, Arkansas, a little sheriff's department letting a man starve to death in their jail. Maybe that doesn't happen in the 2020s. Maybe we learn from the history. Maybe we don't starve black people to death in jail. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, learning about the history and the culture of other people never made me feel, and this is what Republicans say, it will make students feel bad about their whiteness. Learning about others never made me personally feel bad about my whiteness. It made me have empathy for others and an understanding and compassion about the human story that others are experiencing. And, it makes you a better person to learn about other people and the struggles that they've gone through. So why would we not want to teach our children that?
Well, I think part of it has, there's a political ideology in this country that, that some of my, I'm not going to call them friends, some of the white supremacist folks, some of the white nationalist folks don't want you to think about.
Right.
And that's angering and frustrating because we can be a much better society. And I'm struggling on this day because I started today's show off with a story about a guy, 50-year-old man, 200-pound guy who was starved to death in a jail cell because I don't know. I can't figure out what it is about us that would allow your humanity to just to go away from you. And I'm struggling in this moment. I'm really struggling here.
Yeah, we definitely have a crisis of compassion and empathy and civility in our country right now. People treat each other worse than I think I've seen in my lifetime. And it's really disturbing. And I can't see it at this moment getting better.
So how do we turn this around? I mean, I'm with you. I don't know how we get out of this. I don't know how we bridge these gaps because people are in their silos and they're just throwing bombs at each other. We don't even talk to each other anymore. I used to have conservative friends that I used to love to argue with because you could have a good spirited conversation, a good argument, and then you'd walk away and slap each other on the back and go, "Oh, you're still an idiot," and go on with your day. Now it's this kind of visceral hatred that you disagree with me. How dare you? I think it comes back to our education system.
I agree with you. When last year during the pandemic, our governor, Bill Lee in Tennessee, signed the CRT bill into law. And I signed a letter along with the Tennessee Educators of Color as an advocate member asking him to veto the bill. We didn't have enough information on it at the time. My name was leaked to my local Republican Party in my town as being the only teacher in my area to have signed this bill. And being 8 months pregnant at the time, I was targeted. And my husband gave me mace. I wasn't allowed to go places by myself. And that was an incredible experience to have. It was incredibly scary and, not something I think would have happened 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. It's just the place where we are in America right now. We just do not have understanding for each other.
Or compassion. I mean, as a teacher, I look to you as someone who I entrust with you my most valuable resource, our children. And to have people say, "Oh, you're some of the arrows you guys take, would never in a million years do your job. Thank you for doing it." Because of this, look, I mean, I don't know how you get up every day and go, "I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to shape the hearts and minds of the kids of the future of this country," and then to have people throw these kind of hate-filled arrows at you. I don't know how you do it.
It's definitely a challenge. And also, we kind of see the humor in it in a way. This last year, when the kitty litter controversy came out, where, I guess QAnon was talking about how we have litter boxes in our classrooms for children that identify as furries. And I just thought, I don't get paid enough as a teacher in general. I'm definitely not cleaning a litter box on top of my daily duties, nor is my janitor who's paid $7.25 an hour. Like, we're not doing that. I do, however, have kitty litter in my classroom, but for a completely different reason. I have kitty litter in my classroom for a lockdown bucket. I have a painter's bucket in the corner with kitty litter and basically child-sized MREs in case we are in a lockdown situation for longer than a few hours, and kids are going to need to use a restroom. So
now that's deadly serious. Now
that is deadly serious.
Because I was just reading a story before I went on air of the 6-year-old kid who came in and shot his teacher, and they're like, "Well, we searched his backpack. How does a 6-year-old outsmart the entire school district to get a gun into a school and shoot a teacher is beyond me." But here we are.
That story was incredibly troubling. I chose specifically to teach smaller children because they are less likely to carry than, say, our high schoolers.
Yeah, it's. So what does the future hold for us? I mean, I see your toddler running around. When you look at, and it's a beautiful child. What do you see as his future?
Well, his future is going to be interesting. Hopefully, public education can stand the test of time. Hopefully, we can fight these privatizers with their vouchers and their education savings accounts, trying to divert our public funds to private and often religious institutions that can discriminate. Hopefully, we can battle that out for another 10, 15 years. But there's a lot of money being thrown into this fight. I know in Tennessee, lobbyists spent something like $60 million over the last session trying to get these private education bills passed that will divert our public funds to these religious institutions. I'm a big separation of church and state gal, and I definitely don't want to think of my public dollars being spent on private religious schools.
I mean, this is the thing that gets me. They're willing to spend all of this money on destroying public education, but they won't spend that money to make it better. Look, the public education system has some problems. It's underfunded. It needs more funding. And all we hear from the Republicans is, well, we can't throw money at it. Yeah, you can't throw money at every problem, but ones that need money, it helps. And I look at a lot of our problems, it comes down to the lack of resources, class size is too large, a lot of things that we could do that we're just not, because the motive here, and you disagree with me if you need to, but the motive here is to destroy public education so that we can go back to a good segregated school system. Because again, on this day, sadly, in this era, it's still about black and white.
It definitely is. Where I teach in my community, we have a private school that opened in the 1970s, specifically when integration started. And you could see where people were going and why they were choosing to put their children into that school. And that school is now a recipient of some voucher money. So again, it's going to continue to segregate our schools. And separate is not equal, as we've learned over time.
Yeah, so I've had this conversation with people over the years. Was that the wrong decision? Should they have stuck with separate but equal and demand equal and demand better resources and demand more money? Because clearly together and unequal is no better than separate and unequal.
We just need to focus now on funding our public schools. Like, I, as an art teacher, teach over 700 children a year. My yearly budget for art supplies is $250.
What?
Yes, for 750 children.
So where does the rest of that money come from? Because clearly you need, clearly you need more than just that.
Mostly private grants that I write on my own free time. I also do a little bit of fundraising, but where I teach, we're rural poverty. We have wonderful families, but unfortunately they don't have a lot to give. So fundraising is a challenge.
Now, why is music education so important? I know I have my story, but I'm curious, what your thoughts are.
Oh, arts education is incredibly important. Every time I open a fundraiser online, or say a donors choose, when we were still allowed to do that, but that's another story. I would receive letters from people across the country, even the world, saying, arts education saved my life. I wouldn't have made it through a day if it hadn't been for my theater teacher or my high school art, ceramics teacher. And arts connects to people in a way that other subjects don't. I mean, it motivates kids. It keeps kids in school that need to be there. It's a place where children can feel successful that don't feel successful in a traditional classroom.
Yeah. So last question I've got for you. What's the advice to parents out there? Because I don't know that a lot of parents think about on a daily basis that their local public school is being systematically defunded, that there's a movement afoot to attempt to destroy public education and replace it with, well, if you can afford it, you might get an education. What's the advice to parents?
The advice to parents is to be involved in your children's education, to do what you can to get inside the school, join the PTA, the PTO, the parent organization, see what's really going on in the school. If you can sub for a couple days. You can really get a feel of what's going on inside a school if you're walking the halls with the students.
Well, good stuff, Catherine. I appreciate you taking some time for us. Keep up the great work. Thank you for the work that you do, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks. It was great to talk to you.
You too. Thanks so much. Catherine Vaughn, educator, art teacher, writer. Look, at the end of the day, we've got to save our public education system, and it starts with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day the United Packing House Workers of America went on strike. Their initial demand was for a 25-cent an hour raise. They were also joined in the strike by the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union. The action was part of a massive wave of walkouts after World War II that included steel and auto workers. Frustrated that wartime profits had not benefited working people, unions across multiple industries were on the march. According to historians, historian Roger Horowitz, the United Packing House Workers of America's strike was supported by an overwhelming membership vote of 20-1. For 3 months before the strike, the membership prepared. The strike was planned with the strategy of strong local rank-and-file organizing. Membership was encouraged to participate in mass pickets, as well as in building community support for the action. This grassroots organizing proved a successful tactic. The strike cut meat production across the country by 50%. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle headline declared, "Rush on meat as strike cuts supply." The newspaper described how 300 women had stormed one marketplace to purchase meat before it ran out. Alarmed by the consumer shortages, President Harry S. Truman stepped in. On the 10th day of the strike, by the authority of the War Labor Disputes Act, he ordered the workers back to their jobs. President Truman ordered a commission to study their demands. In the end, the commission awarded the workers a 16-cent an hour raise. Although it fell short of the quarter-an-hour demand, it was the largest increase ever won in the industry. It was also the first successful strike by the meatpacking workers. The workers had shown how local solidarity could demonstrate the power of labor. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So what's interesting is, in the break there talking with Catherine, she brought up the fact that she's got a master's degree. A master's degree, and it took her getting a master's degree and over I think she had a decade to just make $50,000 a year. You wonder why people are leaving the education profession. You wonder why we have, I think I read a story, 400,000 teachers nationwide were short. You wonder why? Because you're not paying them, you're defunding it. And this is done on purpose. This is done systematically. It's always interesting to me to listen to my Republican friends talk about how there's all of these plots and all of this stuff out there. Like that theory about race that's critical. It's everywhere. They're indoctrinating the children, when the reality is there is a plan for public education, and it's a bad one. It's about destroying it. It's about taking it away. Because they don't want a great equalizer. They don't want, I love the George Carlin bit. They don't want a populace smart enough to know that they're getting screwed over. They don't want people to be capable of critical thinking, of critical thought. They don't want people asking questions. They want people marginally smart enough to push the buttons, move the paper, do the work, but not smart enough to answer the questions. But, and this is the important part of it, the part that Carlin left out, with such inflated egos that they don't know any better. We hear now all the time, people don't want to work anymore. We hear it about the teachers. They don't want to work anymore. They don't want to work for poverty wages. Someone sent me a job posting where you had to be proficient in Microsoft, you had to be proficient in all these different, computer softwares and all this, all these qualifications, like a whole page of qualifications. Preferred qualification educationally was a master's degree. Minimum salary requirements, $15.29 an hour. And you go, wait a second. It's not that people don't want to work. It's that people don't want to work for poverty wages. And this is that example. And I think people are finally starting to come around to, hey, you know what? I'm tired of getting the short end of the stick. Now, what's angering is the right has a masterful media strategy. Last week, what did we talk about the whole last half of last week? Talked about stoves and how the stove troopers were going to come and take your gas stoves. Yeah, there were no stove troopers. There were nobody taking your stoves. But boy, did they get the outrage machine ramped up. The symbiotic relationship between the media mouthpieces and the political mouthpieces and all of the gears and wheels and all of that moving in perfect harmony to do what? to misinform, disinform, and to divide. So why? So then we don't ask the questions of why life is harder. You talk to anybody, things were better years ago. We made higher wages, life was simpler. You hear that all the time. And why is that? Well, because the share of the economy was, and I keep coming back to this because this is the true north for me. The share of workers being able to participate in the economy was much greater. You had much stronger unions, you had stronger bargaining power, you had stronger ability to participate. You had a tax code that said, you know what, we're going to invest in things like education. We're going to ensure that the things, I think back to when I was in school, and I went to a working class high school. They had a shop class. They had, whatever you needed. You didn't have to pay to play sports. You didn't have to pay to be in any of the extracurriculars. They were all there. I look at my kids now and the opportunities they have to engage in extracurricular activities and school functions, not there. And for me, this is part of that experience of education, of bringing people in to be part of a society that's being destroyed. Because this is Education Choice Week. This is Choice Week, which is why Sarah Huckabee Sanders was on TV going, we're going to destroy that public education and give you the choice of a private school. Not the one that she would send her kids to, not the private schools that the 1% send their kids. No. Not those private schools. Private for you. And what we know that the whole charter thing hasn't panned out. There are a couple that do a little bit better, but the majority of them, they do no better and in a lot of cases do worse. And you know what? They go broke every couple of years. It's like businesses. Businesses go broke every 5 years, just about. Most startups fail within 5 years. Same thing with charter schools. Only we keep propping them up with a lot of rich people money that we used to tax and use for education. We now give tax breaks for them to be able to choose where they want their tax dollars to go in creating an alternative education system. And what does that leave the working class people? Well, stuck in no man's land. Hoping, wishing, wanting, and struggling. And then told, be grateful. Just be happy you have a job. Be happy your kids get educations. On this day, it's kind of hard not to be angry. Because when you talk about a dream that has not been fulfilled, a dream that, given the reality of the moment we're in, is probably never going to be fulfilled. Because the rich and powerful will never allow it to happen. Because we keep voting for the clowns that we've got now. And it's time to start throwing some bums out. I mean, seriously. Look at what the Republicans have done so far in the House. We knew it was going to be a clown show, and it has been it's been everything you could have asked for. Except the fact is nothing's going to get done. Lives are not going to get better. Opportunities aren't going to get better. But at least the bread and circus will be there. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Send me something to cheer me up. Those go to the top. Quick break. Right back.
This past year, we saw pretty much everything that climate change has to throw at us.
Extreme weather cost the U.S. more than $1 trillion in just 7 years. NOAA finds the last 8 years have all been the hottest ever recorded. Plus,
it is a day ending in Y, so there's another freak out going on over at Fox News.
Fox pretends the Biden administration wants to cancel your kitchen stove.
All of that madness and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Joe Biden's climate change agenda now targeting your kitchen.
Biden's coming for your gas stove. A ban on your gas stove.
Ban gas-powered stoves. The White House is now attempting to ban all gas ovens.
You know, if it wasn't for pretend outrage, Fox News wouldn't have anything to be outraged about at all. This is your Green News Report.
If the maniacs in the White House come from my stove, they can pry it from my cold, dead hands.
Okay, Desi Doyen. First, they were going to ban your light bulbs. Then they were going to ban your hamburgers. Now, apparently, if you watch Fox News, they're going to come to your kitchen and haul your stove right out of it.
Yes, and it's not just Fox News. Republicans are also lying about this.
Go figure.
Again, turning valid concerns about toxic pollution from gas-fired kitchen stoves into a new culture war. And no, Biden is not trying to take away your stove. It is a lie.
In fact, the administration will give you something like $800 to buy a new stove if you wish. You're welcome.
Yes, that is thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act.
Passed only by Democrats, not by one single Republican.
In real news, the U.S. saw $18 billion extreme weather disasters in 2022. That's 18 weather events that caused more than $1 billion each in damages, led by Hurricane Ian and historic drought in the western U.S. Climate disasters in 2022 collectively caused $165 billion in damages across the nation, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and killed nearly 500 Americans in 1 year. Climate scientists at NOAA say it's part of a trend of hyperactive disaster years, and they warn that the trend is unlikely to reverse. The series of atmospheric rivers pummeling California is almost certain to be the first billion-dollar weather disaster of 2023.
Yeah, at least $1 billion.
NOAA also reports that extreme weather disasters have cost the U.S. more than $1 trillion over just the past 7 years and killed more than 5,000 Americans. Back in the 1980s, the average length of time between billion-dollar disasters used to be nearly 3 months. Now it's just 18 days.
So 7 years ago, when they were telling us we just don't have the money to do anything about climate change, that was, well, $1 trillion ago.
Globally, 2022 was the 5th hottest year on record since record-keeping began in the mid-1880s. That's according to the European Climate Agency, Copernicus. NASA and NOAA are expected to reach similar conclusions in coming weeks. Copernicus also found that the 8 warmest years on record have all occurred in the last 8 years. Europe had its hottest year on record, and rising global temperatures caused record-shattering heat waves across the northern hemisphere, catastrophic flooding in Pakistan, and intense, relentless drought in the U.S., China, and Europe. 2022, clocking in as the 5th hottest year, is quite remarkable because it comes in a year with a cooling La Nina pattern in the Pacific Ocean, which does not bode well for the next El Nino.
So if it wasn't for the La Nina that's supposed to cool things down, can only imagine how hot 2022 would have been.
Yep. And yes, extreme weather disasters are increasing in frequency, and man-made global warming is making heat waves, storms, and droughts worse. That's according to a sweeping new report from the American Meteorological Society this week. Scientists are increasingly able to pinpoint exactly how the weather is changing as human activity heats up the Earth. But climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann, in an interview with MSNBC, cited climate action, like the passage of landmark climate provisions in last year's Inflation Reduction Act and the acceleration of clean energy in Europe and China as reasons to keep working.
There is urgency, but there's also agency. There is still time to avert the worst impacts of climate change. And we have to be able to hold two seemingly incongruous thoughts in our minds at the same time. It can be possible that we're seeing substantial progress while there isn't yet enough progress.
Maybe so, but then why are they coming for my kitchen stove? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this summer is going to be interesting in that, as I've been saying, the Teamsters have an opportunity. The new president, Sean O'Brien, has an opportunity to really transform the future of work in this country. This UPS contract, if done right, can be transformative, can reclaim that bit of the working class. And I go back to my grandparents. My grandfather fought for the National Master Freight Agreement. That single agreement took truck drivers out of being poverty wage jobs and moved them solidly into the upper echelon of the working class. This contract can do just that, not just for the handful of UPSers, but for all of them. This can be transformational across the package industry. That's how big this can be. And that's why I've asked Richard Hooker to come talk with us. Richard's the Secretary-Treasurer of Teamsters Local 623 out here in Philadelphia. He represents one of the bigger UPS facilities. Richard, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, brother. Always a pleasure.
So before we get into this, I wanted to get your thoughts. Today being Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, we celebrate the day. I wanted to get your thoughts on today and what it means to you.
Well, to me, it means so very much. For what he stood for, the sacrifices that he made. I wouldn't be in the position that I am in today if it wasn't for him and others like him to fight for all working people, but especially for, African Americans and minorities. The sacrifices that he made. It was just he's a profound man, and for what he has done and what his legacy continues to do and what it brings forth even today. So I'm forever in his debt. Again, if it wasn't for brothers like Martin Luther King, there will be no Richard Hooker Jr., the first African-American principal officer of Teamsters Local 623.
No, and what people don't maybe not realize is that he was in Memphis to support striking workers, because that was a core tenet of his belief structure, that economic power, that reward for work, that ability to support oneself through their labor.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that. I mean, he was there to support working people, working families. He didn't have to do that, but he wanted to do that. He felt that it was necessary because civil rights and workers' rights are the same. Better working conditions, safer communities, livable wages, a voice in the workplace, a voice in the community. Those things are the same. So again, for what he's done and what he did, it's just an honor to be able to celebrate him today.
Yeah. Now, to honor that legacy is to move it forward. And I've said this UPS contract that's coming up over the summer. Am I being hyperbolic to say that this can be transformative? This can, reinvigorate work and remold the working class and what work in this country is? Is that a bit hyperbolic, do you think?
It's perfect. I think what you said is perfect, and it's right on the head. What we can do with this contract can really set the stage for future generations. So not about right now, but for our kids and grandkids and their kids and their grandkids, right? This contract can go a long way with organizing Amazon, Walmart, and those type of companies who are brutal as well. So this can really be a springboard into the lifeblood, which is organizing for the Teamsters. And I'm hoping and praying that we do get the deal that our members so desperately demand and deserve, especially after what happened with the COVID. I think when you throw that in there,
Yeah.
workers are not willing to just wait. They're really to get down and dirty and fight this company, and that's what it's going to take to win.
No, and this is what I've been saying. I think Sean O'Brien is the right guy in the right moment, because I haven't seen the kind of energy that I see with Teamster members that I talk to across the country, whether it's in Chicago or Minneapolis or wherever. I haven't seen this kind of energy to take on and fight for something that we're seeing right now. I just haven't seen it. So this could be that moment, if used properly, that can be transformative of making this contract fair across the board and then using it to, like you said, go out and organize Amazon, go out and organize FedEx, to bring people into this, to make this industry not one of poverty and desperation and gig economy kind of work, but actual life employment, good wage employment.
Absolutely. And when you look at UPS's model, they exploit the low-wage part-time workers. There's 350,000 UPS Teamsters. 230 to 240 of those UPS Teamsters are part-time, low-wage workers. And there's a group of those workers they're not waiting around for the leadership. They're not waiting around for management. They're not waiting around for someone to come save them. They're mobilizing themselves because they are tired and fed up of either the inability from the leadership and the bullish nature of the company. So they're taking these demands in their own hands, and I applaud them for that. And I think all of us need to get behind them because again, they make up about 66 to 70% of UPS's workforce.
Now you brought up the pandemic here a second ago, which I find really important to understand the moment that we're in. We called those part-timers essential frontline heroes. We patted them on the back, and UPS, to bring them in the door, to entice them to come to work, gave them a higher wage, which in this area where I'm at was like $24 an hour. And then on a Friday decided, you know what, we're going to claw that back, and literally took like $10 an hour from them. I mean, that kind of indignity, that can't sit well.
It hasn't, and I think when you add the pandemic and what they did to the wages, just taking it from them like that, in some areas without notice. I know here in Philly, they didn't even tell them; they just took it. Now of course, I reached out to the city, and because as you all know that that's wage theft. You have to let the workers know when you're taking their pay, and they didn't do that. So we took it to the city, and we were able to get out those workers over $32,000 in back wages. But UPS doesn't care. That's just a check. I mean, they'll just write that off. But I don't think they're going to be able to write this movement off. Come August 1st, if there's no deal, they're not going to be able to write anything off. They're going to understand that what they did in the pandemic, what they did to those part-timers for taking those wages, they're going to have to pay for that. They're going to have to pay for that.
Now, do you foresee there possibly being a strike? I've had both sides. I've had people say absolutely going to happen. I've had people say absolutely not going to happen, or don't we know yet?
I will say this: it's dependent on the company. I think our members, they've had enough. The pandemic, no hazard pay, no dignity, no respect. I think that pushed them over the edge. And I think when you really sit down and talk to a lot of the members, they are willing to do whatever it takes to get that respect and dignity back. It's like you said, it's not about the wages anymore. It's about that respect, that dignity, because UPS, the management, they talk to the workers any kind of way, treat them any kind of way. And again, I hate to keep doing the pandemic in there, but that pandemic really pushed workers to the edge. When you make as much money as UPS has made during the pandemic, you treat your workers like nothing. They're not going to take it anymore.
Yeah.
And they're willing to do whatever it takes.
Now, you're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Richard Hooker Jr. He's Secretary, Treasurer, and Principal Officer of Teamsters Local 623 in Philadelphia. They represent one of the largest UPS facilities in the area. Now, you come back to how wealthy UPS is. I saw a story. They're buying back something like $2 billion worth of their stock. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. Again, they have so much profit right now because of the pandemic, because of people are not going to the stores anymore. They're ordering online. They feel safer at home, and it puts a pressure on our members to deliver. And I want the public to really understand this, if I can. There's nothing that you can go to the store and get that UPS makes. They don't manufacture anything. They don't make anything. They don't build anything. Everything that they have is because of the Teamsters. Everything. So I want every member to understand that and the public to understand that because UPS doesn't do anything without the members. Nothing at all. They don't make anything. There's no profit. So all this money they have is off the backs of our sisters and brothers. And depending on what they do, we go a long way come August 1st.
Yeah. No, the reason I bring up the stock buybacks is, that should be money that's distributed amongst the workforce. That was the $10 an hour they stole from those part-timers for every hour they work. That's the wages that they've taken and the benefits that they've taken over the years. That should be going back into the workforce, not going to make the CEO wealthier and the shareholders wealthier. That's my point. And the other part of this is it's not just the economics, it's the treatment. You've alluded to this a couple of times. It's that respect. When I get people emailing me about what's going on at UPS, it's the treatment of management. It's the constant surveillance that goes on every minute of every day, and they need help. They need time off.
Yes.
Those seem to be the big three issues. Monetarily, well down the list, but those seem to be the big three. Am I getting this right?
You're getting it right. In the last contract, language was added to try to help our members when it comes to this harassment, right? But it didn't have enough teeth in it. It just says that it could be a monetary penalty. When you deal with a company like UPS, you have to have teeth with your language. You just can't say certain things. There has to be some type of pushback, some fight. So what I'm hoping is that we give our members the teeth that they're looking for. So when your management is retaliating, harassing, it's not going to be a slap on the wrist, or it could be this or it could be that. We need definite language that says, if you do this to our members, this is what's going to happen to you to stop this from happening. Because I shouldn't have come to work, be harassed, be retaliated against because you don't like me, or because I don't work fast enough, or because you just have a problem with me. I come to work to do a job. I don't come to work to get harassed.
Yeah.
That's not what this is about. But UPS is notoriously getting away with this, and our members are tired of it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because the elephant in the room is Amazon. As we speak, they're ramping up a delivery service to be competitive, I guess, with UPS. Is this something we're concerned about? And is there a plan in place to try and figure out how we organize those workers, how we deal with that? I'm curious if something's going on there that we should know about.
Well, I know the international, they have a whole new division for Amazon now. And I think that, this UPS contract will go a long way with organizing Amazon because they do the same work, the same type of work. And when you look at the workers there and our members, same type of members, and this is a great opportunity for them for all of us to come together. I know in Philly, we actually are working together privately around this contract and bring them in, and we can help them, they can help us. Because what we're trying to do here is to show these employers that we're all coming together, non-union Amazon and union UPS. We're going to fight both of them together, right? And I know we're going to win together. So there is some things in place. I know we're doing some stuff here locally, and I know the international has a whole new department that's led by a brother named Randy Corrigan. And so I know they're trying to do some things, and there's more Amazon workers than there are total Teamsters. So that's going to be an uphill battle. But I think we can do it, and I know we will.
Yeah, no, Randy's a good friend of the show. In fact, we just had him on last Monday talking about Amazon because this is an important thing. And something that has to be done. And then for me, the reason I keep coming back to this contract potentially being transformative is that this can be an industry-wide, not just in UPS specific, but an industry-wide contract to cover package delivery drivers across the board, no matter what uniform you're wearing. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just like I know, unions raise the wages. This contract will raise standards, wages, working conditions, quality of life, health, pension, all these things. So a lot is riding on this contract.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we started early. We actually here at 623, we sit down with our supplement negotiations on February the 10th. So we've been meeting with our rank and file committee, with our executive board, with our legal counsel to make sure that we get the best supplement that we've ever had, because that's what our members demand and deserve.
Yeah, right there with you. I hope you'll come back and share more with us down the road as this continues, because this summer is going to be really interesting. The UPS contract, the freight contracts up on the Teamster side, the UAW's contracts up. A lot of big opportunities for working people to see lives get better. I wish you guys the best. And again, I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Absolutely. Have me on anytime. Thank you so much.
Good stuff. Richard Hooker Jr. Appreciate the time. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, speaking of CEO pay and stock buybacks and all of that, in 2021, the 7 top U.S. health insurance CEOs, they raked in $283 million. Aren't you glad to know that our healthcare CEOs are well taken care of? Aren't you happy to know that those 7 people have taken so many dollars out of the healthcare system to kind of line their pocket? And if you think that's bad, between 2012 and 2021, CEOs of the top 14 drug companies, $747 billion in stock buybacks and dividends. Let me repeat that. $747 billion they spent on stock buybacks and dividends. Big Pharma spent $660 billion on research and development for the new drugs. They spent more money giving to rich people and buying back their stocks than they spent on research and development. Now understand, we give them all these tax breaks because we're told They need the money. They know what to do with it. They're smart. They're going to invest it. They're going to use it better than the government could. Look, I got to tell you, if it's me, I think, just digging a ditch and burning it is better than just allowing these companies to be able to buy back their shares and hand it off to CEOs and rich people. Sorry. We were told that money was going to go to, cancer research and new drugs and things to make us better and healthier, not make a handful richer. And this is where Bernie Sanders, who is now the chairman of the HELP Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the Senate, has pointed out that, we spend $13,000 for every man, woman, and child for health care. About 20% of our GDP goes to health care. And yet we have 85 million Americans who are either uninsured or underinsured. We have worse health outcomes, lower life expectancies, higher infant mortality rates than any industrialized nations in the world. We've got all these negative, but we spend the most. These companies are making huge profits. And yet we still have 500,000 people who declare bankruptcy every year because of medical debt. Tens of thousands of people die needlessly because they can't afford to get the care that they need when they need it. And yet, we've got the best health care in the world because it's evidently the most expensive. Reality is 1 in 4 Americans can't afford the medicine that their doctors prescribes to them. You got seniors, and this is not new. You got seniors who ration their pills, cut them in half, don't do the testing, don't do the things that they need to do. And yet things get worse. And the rich are getting richer and richer and richer. And the working class of this country, the 60% of us that live hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, we're continually struggling. And yet we're talking about stoves. And this is where I look at this contract at UPS. There's an opportunity here because those UPS part-timers, they get health care. Those Amazon workers, they don't. Those delivery drivers, they're gig workers. And you know what Amazon's going to right now? I just had someone explain, what the future of Amazon delivery is. You can be, like how you go to the grocery store and you get to be a part-time checkout person because you get to do it yourself. You can now be a delivery driver for Amazon, just like an Uber driver. On your way home from work, you can swing by, pick up a couple of packages and drop them off on the way home. That's the future. That's the future of what Amazon sees. Everyone is going to be a delivery person. Everybody. And you know what happens? Nobody has any money to buy anything because they're paying poverty wages. And this is why, again, I look at this UPS contract as an opportunity to set a floor across the industry to start saying, look, this is what we should be doing. This is the road we should be taking. This is the path. Whether you work for the Postal Service, whether you work for Amazon, FedEx, UPS, that's the floor. Instead of this continual race to the bottom, because look, these companies are wildly profitable because of the labor that their employees partake in. And Richard Hooker's right. UPS doesn't make anything. They don't manufacture anything. They don't produce anything. Every bit of profit that they bring in is because of the men and women who sort those packages, who load those packages, who deliver those packages, and the customer service. Every one of those dollars that was made in profit was because of them. Not because of the CEO, not because of the shareholders and how smart they are, but because of the working people. And this is where, again, return reward to work. It's my thought. Love to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day the United Packing House Workers of America went on strike. Their initial demand was for a 25-cent an hour raise. They were also joined in the strike by the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union. The action was part of a massive wave of walkouts after World War II that included steel and auto workers. Frustrated that wartime profits had not benefited working people, unions across multiple industries were on the march. According to historian Roger Horowitz, the United Packing House Workers of America's strike was supported by an overwhelming membership vote of 20-1. For 3 months before the strike, the membership prepared. The strike was planned with the strategy of strong local rank-and-file organizing. Membership was encouraged to participate in mass pickets, as well as in building community support for the action. This grassroots organizing proved a successful tactic. The strike cut meat production across the country by 50%. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle headline declared, "Rush on meat as strike cuts supply." The newspaper described how 300 women had stormed one marketplace to purchase meat before it ran out. Alarmed by the consumer shortages, President Harry S. Truman stepped in. On the 10th day of the strike, by the authority of the War Labor Disputes Act, he ordered the workers back to their jobs. President Truman ordered a commission to study their demands. In the end, the commission awarded the workers a 16-cent an hour raise. Although it fell short of the quarter-an-hour demand, it was the largest increase ever won in the industry. It was also the first successful strike by the meatpacking workers. The workers had shown how local solidarity could demonstrate the power of labor. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Sometimes little things can be a big deal. For example, in considering ways to help protect Mother Earth from global environmental rampages by us humans, look out your window. In many cities and most suburbs, chances are you're looking at a lawn, a grass-carpeted yard that looks almost the same as the one next door, the one next to it, etc. Some see a lush expanse of green grass as the ultimate in landscaping beauty, and some even consider a well-manicured lawn to be a measure of one's moral character. Beauty and piety aside, though, the spread and intensification of lawn culture has become an environmental extravagance that is already unsustainable in whole sections of our country, and it adds up to a steadily increasing burden on Earth's essential resources. Grass itself is natural, but keeping it alive across thousands of square miles is not, for it requires a deluge of chemicals and endless rivers of water applied again and again, yard after yard, trying to keep those plots green. And, oh, the irony, their green includes eliminating bees, butterflies, and, well, nature. One statistic tells the tale. Americans use more than 10 times more poison per acre on lawns than America's farmers use on their crops. Just glance around you and you'll see the grass lawn imperative at work throughout your community. It surrounds local schools, greens up corporate complexes, spreads across college campuses, forms miles of golf courses, etc. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is not a diatribe against grassy plots, which can be natural joys. But let's get real, get creative, and get in touch with the full balance and beauty of nature. You can promote ground cover sanity right where you live with native plants, xeriscaping, organic methods, rain gardens, and rewilding your yard with things like prairie grass. For help, go to rewild.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this George Santos saga is getting more interesting by the day. Evidently back in 2020, he did a podcast, said, I put myself through college, got an MBA from NYU, and I have zero debt. He said, I hate looking at youth today and seeing them sitting on their behinds and acting like, ugh, this is so hard. Never mind the fact he never graduated from NYU, or in fact, any college or university. But hey, what's a fact when you got a good story to tell? Wow, I mean, it gets more interesting as the day goes longer. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the fun and entertainment we are seeing in Congress on the Santos saga. I've asked my good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So what do you think? You went to NYU, NBA, no debt, but never actually went there.
I was in the hot box, and, so I know how that is. But I had friends, people who knew me, et cetera, And with Santos's case, he comes into Congress, and not only does he not have friends, he doesn't make friends.
Yeah.
Everything I'm hearing from friends up on Capitol Hill, Rick, tell me that, and this is coming from Republicans. They tell me that, he came in, he wasn't remorseful, he was, arrogant, continuing to say things everybody knows is not true. And so, I think he's doomed at some particular time. Of course, the Speaker can't say much because he's a vote until he goes. And now he's got this link to the cousin of a sanctioned Russian oligarch. Then he has two roommates that said I don't know what a blueberry must be. I'm not a fashion person, and I know you aren't either. But something that's blueberry scarf, it must be valuable or something.
Yeah, I guess he stole some blueberry scarf and wore it.
I don't know. Some blueberry thing must be valuable. And he sold some scarves, the roommate said. I mean, it just never quits with this guy.
Yeah,
Never.
again, the sad reality is this is what you get when, I don't know. I do find it interesting that Kevin McCarthy did say he had some questions about Santos. He always had a few questions. That's his position now.
Right. Well, that's because they're saying that a lot of the leaders knew that he had falsification, on his resume and his background. That's what they're saying, and that's what some people are trying to find out who knew what, and when to it.
So now let me ask you this:
I imagine at some time, he's going to have to go. Now, one thing I will note to you, though, one of the Republicans said that, if in fact he violated campaign finance laws, he's gone. Well, let me correct that for a second, because people violate campaign finance laws all the time. So that statement about, well, if he violates campaign finance, he's gone, is just an attempt to say, that's how we're going to get him.
Yeah, that's how we're going to get rid of him.
That's not necessarily the case, because if they try to expel him based on campaign finance laws, I mean, people violate them quite regular.
Yeah, all the time. No, you're
all the time.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing. You brought up the links to this sanctioned Russian oligarch. There's a lot of people now who, I've gotten a bunch of email on this going, is he a Russian asset? Or is he a Russian plant? And this is kind of spinning. Now, I'm not conspiratorial, but it seems odd that he was able to make it through an entire election cycle, and really this didn't come to anyone's. I don't know. It was able to be tapped down. It just seems odd to me.
Well, there's also some strange things when it comes to his income, because he went from extremely small income to an unexplained larger income, and I mean unexplained. And he said, well, I have a company that I consult, but I don't think he particularly had particularly a list of clients who paid him X amount, but then he had this link, and it's deeper ties than originally was thought. And this businessman cultivated close ties at one time with, a Trump confidant, and he's a cousin of a sanctioned oligarch. So you start to look at all of this, and you wonder, okay, where does this go to?
Yeah, it seems like all roads are leading back to Moscow and Russia. And again, I know my friends on the right go, it's all a hoax. But when all arrows are pointing in a certain direction, I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, I think there's two countries above all, and I mean, everybody loves to talk about Iran because it's Iran and the leaders of Iran. But when you want to look at infiltration, you want to look at manipulation and, downright potential espionage, et cetera, just look at Russia and China. I mean, those are the two that you can point to. and we've had case after case, including, analysts who came here from China that were involved with espionage, electronic espionage, but also, in particular, Russia seems to be sort of, China goes after kind of the secrets. Russia goes after the infiltration of people, to get people into positions and get close to them.
So, and again, I'm not jumping on the conspiratorial bandwagon, but is it possible that this is a plant?
You never know.
Yeah.
In the SEC filing, it was called the Intrater, put thousands of dollars into Santos's one-time employer, which was Harbor City, and they were accused of running a Ponzi scheme, and money went into there, and so they're thinking that came in particular, between Santos and the ties and the cousin of the oligarch. So now this guy's now a U.S. citizen and has an investment firm, but has extensive ties to one of the interests of his Russian cousins, who again was a sanctioned oligarch named Beckelsberg.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't write this stuff up. Netflix wouldn't pick up this show.
I always say that. I was telling somebody yesterday, I do your show, and I was telling them to tune into your show, and I said, we talk about if we went to some big movie producer, and if we started with, in 2016, we're going to have Trump come down the escalator, they'd say, "Get out of here, you two." You're crazy.
Let's take the next step. The next bit of this play. The RNC is looking at a leadership fight coming up, and the pillow guy, I guess, is still in it. Would it not be the greatest chapter if the pillow guy was the head of the RNC?
For the Democratic side, yes.
I mean, just for me, I want this. I don't ask for much.
It would be entertaining. Yes. Right, it would be entertaining.
The comedy of this would be fantastic.
Well, it would be destructive for the Republican National Committee, of course.
Well, of course, but it would still be funny.
Right. Well, they had, there's a fight for it, internally. And, of course, when there's a Republican president, they particularly pick who's going to be there. And the Democratic side, the same thing. They have a lot of influence. But, right now there's a big battle for it.
Yeah, it's a three-way. It's a three-way shot between Ronna McDaniel, who's been there for since 2016, and this lawyer from California, this Harmeet Dillon, who's an election lawyer from California, and the My Pillow guy.
Right.
I'm pulling for the My Pillow guy.
Well, there's been this battle so far, as you said, between McDaniel and who's kind of a tough to beat incumbent, been there. She's got institutional support, and then Dillon, who's considered, he's got a lot of grassroots support, even though it's a bit of an uphill battle. But when you do throw the pillow guy in, if he takes some votes, he could be the kind of the kingmaker.
He could be the sleeper.
You were okay. I got it. Oh, there'd be too many jokes. There'd be too many, and he's so out there.
Oh, he's crazy.
I don't know how his business survived.
I have no idea. There's got to be Russian money going there because I don't know any. I know people who have had his pillows, and they all tell me they're terrible. I've known people who have pitched them, and they give them to you to use for a while, and they all give them back. Because and again, I have no experience. I've just what people have told me, and I don't because they're expensive too. It's not like they're cheap, which is weird.
Now, the interesting thing, by the way, about Dillon, she's an Indian-born immigrant and became active, I think, in the 2000s. In the Republican Party, and so that's kind of interesting. I mean, if she would win the head of the party,
it would be interesting to see how if that were to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think Ronna McDaniel is going to get it because
probably.
But it's always fun to want. I wanted to get your thought on impeachment watch. because I'm counting down the days until Republicans shoot themselves in the foot with a sham impeachment. Are you looking at the clock like I am?
Well, I can predict you what the first impeachment talk round is going to be, of course.
That's going to be classified documents.
Hunter Biden. It's going to be. I got to not laugh when I say this, but anyway, it's going to be the classified documents, because it doesn't matter that the other guy had them. Nope. It's this guy having them. If they go after the president for those documents, then they're foolish. Look, no doubt about it. I don't care the difference between Trump and Biden. Now with Biden having these documents, 3 rounds of them, I know they're less, I know the differences, but it doesn't matter. This makes it a political wash. This makes Garland sit there and DOJ and say, this is what it neutralizes a lot of things. But if the Republicans go after Biden for the documents, they've got their guys sitting there too, So it's not the right thing to go after. I mean, there's no right thing right now, but that's really not the right thing.
Or is it? Is it the perfect thing? Because I was thinking about this today, because my thought process is exactly what you said. If they do go after Biden, it's going to open up Trump, because clearly his taking and holding and withholding documents much worse than, they're in my garage, right. I didn't even know it. Here, take them back. This is a way to go after Biden, make Biden look bad, weaken him, and get some revenge, but also a way to neutralize Trump. Because maybe the DOJ then goes, okay, now we have to indict him because, well, now it's in the public sphere and it's clearly worse. It's a way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Now, you remember that movie where they had the 2 former presidents? James Garner was one of them. Jack Lemmon?
Yeah. Love that movie.
You're telling me that they'll parade the 2 together? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm saying that they'll go after Biden in the hopes that the DOJ goes after Trump, so that they could get rid of both of them.
But I was just saying about if all of a sudden.
No, I mean this could be another bad Netflix movie.
Both of them.
This could be another bad Netflix movie, because it seems like these are the writers
these days.
Exactly, it seems like these are the writers. It's crazy. Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on China. You brought up China a minute ago. Evidently, Janet Yellen's going to be meeting with the Chinese vice premier in Switzerland because, hey, we're kicking off Davos this week, today, I guess, right?
Right.
Thoughts on the meeting?
There's several things, as we know, going on, the debt ceiling, et cetera. And so Janet Yellen, is going to be deeply involved in that for months until June, until it comes to an explosive head. And right now, she's the economic kind of pinpoint person, and she is going to meet, which is at a high level, with the deputy premier, from China. And I think this is a kind of a precarious meeting in the sense that they've got to be careful about because China loves to be 3 or 4 chess moves ahead of everybody, and that's how they operate. So I think that obviously meeting with them and talking about the world economy, et cetera, is fine, but there's going to have to be a little bit of caution with it because China's going to push to undo the tariffs, which at this point in time President Biden hasn't done, from the Trump era, which I think is a smart move. And so meeting with them is fine. I just would assume that Yellen and the White House are going to be on the same page, that this is a slow, cautious process. Now, the one thing I would hate to see, China is angry because of our so is some of Europe, our quest to, Lord forbid, manufacture our own products, So they're angry at that. And I think that's one we've obviously got to stay very firm and positioned on.
Now, I was going to ask you about this because, I had heard, a podcast of someone going on about how Europe's upset that we're taking their manufacturing, and that how China and Europe are merging and are coming to agreements because the rest of the world knows that America's, on the downslide and all this. And I'm going, wrong message. The message is how about we reshore manufacturing? We shore up our ability to produce the things that we need, because the pandemic kind of highlighted that need, and not give in and not cave as is expected. I always go back to what Dick Cheney said when he was vice president about the Democrats caving. He goes, "It's what they do." I'm hoping Biden doesn't cave on this.
Right. And that's why I said this is precarious, because China is upset about it. Europe's upset about it. And if we've learned anything with the pandemic, it's about our dependency on certain things from the supply chain. Sure, there's going to be some trade, but China does need us. The only problem we've had with China for years, until Trump, went after them, and sincerely went after them, because a lot of people didn't. They campaign, and then things had changed. But Biden kept that position too. So Biden has kept, the pressure up on China, and I think I would hope because of his, working background and his thoughts towards working people. And this is one thing that, again, Yellen has to be very, very cautious she doesn't get on the other side of the White House when it comes to the manufacturing issue.
No, this is something that, everybody, everyone who says bad things about Biden go, look, at the end of the day, I don't care about the noise. I care about the manufacturing policy.
Yes.
I care about the policies that he's moving, which have been fantastic, transformative. And when in
right.
10 or 15 years, when we look back on the last 2 years, we're going to go, those were good years. He did the right thing at the right moment. So whatever the Republicans do in these next 2 years, because impeachment watch is going on as we speak, because they're going to impeach him for something. You know that. Those 2 years are going to be his legacy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And again, people wondered, because he made a statement during the campaign about lunch, or they weren't as dangerous, something like that. And, that was taken to say, oh, if you elect him, that's it, he's going to reverse everything. And I think that he's been, appropriately cautious, and he's, been tough on the issue. And this is the one issue that, he needs to do this, because not just for a political purpose, obviously, but for public policy. I mean, our jobs, people have been fighting this fight for decades, trying to just get some kind of parity. And like I always said, when they said, well, these workers here have to get more productive in America, I'm sorry, but you can't compete against slave labor, which is what China is.
Yep.
Slave labor, it still is. So I think standing up to them is the good thing, and I would assume, again, that Yellen will, in these meetings, stay on the right side of the White House, because, sometimes that doesn't happen with cabinet officials, but I would assume this one's a big deal, and she'll do that.
Yeah, I hope so. Good stuff. Appreciate the time, Bob. As always, good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. I hope they stay the course. Stay the course. It is one of the things that I thought the Trump administration did well. I think that they did right. The tariffs on China, even though they didn't have a bigger strategy, which we should have had, that was a step in the right direction. I know. How dare you give Trump credit for something? No, you got to give credit where credit is due. The other thing is giving labor rights to Mexican workers, fighting for that in NAFTA or the USMCA or whatever they're calling it now. Smart thing to do. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1920, and thousands of immigrant detainees and labor activists won the basic constitutional right to consult with an attorney. These detainees were victims of the infamous Palmer raids. A. Mitchell Palmer had been appointed Attorney General by President Woodrow Wilson. Palmer feared that the Russian Revolution would spread to the United States. When a bomb went off at his home, Palmer became convinced of a communist plot to overthrow the American government. He enlisted the help of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI in his battles against suspected radicals. Over the course of the next several months, Palmer and Hoover raided labor headquarters and homes in more than 30 cities. They arrested 16,000 suspected communists and anarchists. Many swept up in the raids were arrested without warrant, for nothing more than having a foreign accent. While most were eventually released, 248 people, including Emma Goldman, were deported to Russia. Some of the detainees, including members of the Industrial Workers of the World, were held without counsel. As news of the brutality of the sweep spread, public opinion began to turn against Palmer. Finally, on this day in 1920, the detainees still facing deportation were allowed to meet with attorneys to discuss their cases. A 2013 study found that on any given day in the United States, 34,000 immigrants sit in jails, prisons, and holding facilities awaiting potential deportation. Many, if not most, do not have access to the representation of counsel in these hearings. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. So, George, listening on AM 820 WCPT Chicago, writes 30 million Americans are subject to non-compete clauses. I listened to your last podcast and wanted to tell you about my story working for a fast food chain here in the Chicago area that had us all sign non-compete agreements and signed forced arbitration agreements. He goes on to tell this story about how, this, and nobody knew any better until the Jimmy John story a couple years ago, how the company had just kind of slid it into the paperwork and nobody knew what they were signing. Everyone signed it. And now that this non-compete issue has come up before the Federal Trade Commission, because what they're talking about doing is banning these entirely. I don't see how they apply to fast food workers. I don't see how, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is proprietary and you can't go across the street and make one. But what they're saying is these non-compete agreements reduce earnings of working people by almost $300 billion a year. And it goes back to what we keep talking about. It's the holding down of wages, it's the suppression of wages, it's the systematic suppression of workers' ability to get better wages, hours, conditions. You know who doesn't have non-compete agreements? People with union contracts. You know who doesn't sign forced arbitration agreements? People with union contracts. This is one of those moments. Saw a story over at Twitter. So when I get this email, I'm thinking about Twitter. Twitter fires their janitors. The janitors file a class action suit to go to court. The judge says, sorry, you can't file a class action suit. Thank you, Supreme Court. You have to go where? That's right, to an arbitrator, because you signed a forced arbitration clause. You don't have access to the courts. These are janitors. These are freaking janitors who have been forced to sign these forced arbitration clauses, having their rights taken away from them. Now, understand, they don't sign them, they don't get the job. They don't get the job, they don't get to pay the rent. They don't get to pay the rent, they're out in the street. So they sign them because they don't have a choice. And I've been saying for years, this is something that has to be addressed. Is it going to be addressed by our Supreme Court? No, our Supreme Court's horrible. They're the ones who put this as the law of the land. They're the ones who decided, well, these fine, end class action lawsuits. If you're a company and you screw millions of people out of $20 a piece, that's great. They can't all come together and sue you, so you get away with it. Because who's going to go sue AT&T over a $20 charge? Nobody. But 1 million people coming together, that's a different story. And this is what our Supreme Court has done to us, has forced us into these legal wranglings that benefit who? Corporate America. Not you, not me, but them. And this is why, again, I keep coming back to the politic of the day and which side working people need to be on. Look at this court, man. This court's going to do some ugly stuff. We're going to roll back the entire 20th century. We're going to get back to the good old days, where if you're hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages and deplorable conditions, it's your freedom. Get ready for it. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.